Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Monday, February 10th, 2020. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, David Dayen. On to Iowa, New Hampshire, and the bullshit economy. Also on the program today, Trump fires witnesses in his impeachment. Schumer demands an IG report in response. New Hampshire down to the wire as Buttigieg makes a final play for the billionaire support. Trump's budget, pure Republican, with cuts to Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and a little bump to the military. The Democratic House passes the Protecting Right to Organize Act. PRO Act. It'll die in the Senate, or in fact, never even see the light of day there. Meanwhile, Trump administration seeks to suspend humanitarian assistance to Yemen. That's right, folks. Rudy Giuliani now has a formal pipeline to task the Department of Justice to investigate Trump's opponents. Meanwhile, the Oscars happened last night, but I fell asleep. All this, and lastly, 4 members of the Chinese military indicted for that huge Equifax breach. All this and more on today's program. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We are in skeletal crew mode again. Here we go.
True believer mode.
True believer mode. That's right. Brendan is here. We got Dorsey on the on computer number 2, and I will be holding down the fort solo today. A little bit of house cleaning. We will be doing live coverage tomorrow night of the New Hampshire primary. What is that buzz? What? Oh, that's weird. All right, keep it up just a little bit, I guess. Oh, there it goes. It went away. We will be doing live coverage of the New Hampshire results as they come in tomorrow night. We will be here tomorrow. Dave Weigel will be hopefully on the program to give a sense of what's happening in New Hampshire. Feels a little bit like there's a Klobuchar surge. And, put that down just again. I hear it again. There's a bit of a Klobuchar surge. Now, I would be remiss if I did not remind you what John from San Antonio has been telling us all along is the most important factor structurally about the primaries this time around. And that is you need a 15% threshold in the primary state to be awarded delegates. And if you are someone who is excited to have a progressive, like I say, I don't think most voters see the lanes in the way that we see lanes around here, or if you listen to this program. In other words, I don't think they see ideological lanes in the same way. Everybody who's interested in politics talks about the progressives or the left or whatever it is and the moderates. I don't know if most voters, in fact, I'm quite convinced that most voters don't see those lanes. Maybe 35%, 40% of the primary goers do. But the rest, I think, just they have their own lanes that they create. But if you are one of those people who are looking for the progressives to win in this primary, the rise of Klobuchar is heartening. Because between Joe Biden's faltering, and he is faltering, I think he's going to make it to Super Tuesday, but it wouldn't surprise me now if, and even a month ago I wouldn't have said this, it would not shock me. I still doubt it, but it would not shock me if he drops out before Super Tuesday, where he's encouraged to do so. But what's really happening is Michael Bloomberg has been leading a sort of a rear assault, as it were, on Joe Biden, taking away a lot of his endorsements, taking away a lot of his money sources. Bloomberg doesn't need any money. He just meets with the donors and says, don't give any money. And that is an offer that many of them can't refuse, it seems like. So with Pete Buttigieg having what I think will be a temporary surge, and Amy Klobuchar having a moderate surge, as it were, and Bloomberg having his surge in terms of eating up a little bit of the cash that could be available, there will be no coalescing around a moderate. That's what I suspect and what I'm seeing now. I mean, it may change, but you could very well have 3 or 4 candidates in New Hampshire all landing somewhere between 13 and 19 percentage points of the vote. And if they are under 15, if 4 of them get 13, only one gets above 15%. That person gets all, I think, of the delegates. Now, I think that's unlikely. I think Pete Buttigieg is going to get, above the 15% threshold, as well will Bernie. But the question is, will the other 3? Will Warren, will Klobuchar, will Biden? And if they don't, you're going to see the delegates split between Buttigieg and Bernie. So Friday night, we did not have live coverage of the debate. The plan was for me to go up to New Hampshire. MSNBC had asked me to go up there. And I thought I was going to get up there in time to start to live stream the debate. And at the very least, just sort of like YouTube along with it. But I got stuck on the tarmac because of gale force winds in New York. And I rolled up there just as the debate was starting. And basically watched the debate and then watched for about an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes while everybody else got on stage to talk about the debate. And then I ended up going on for about 10 minutes. And that was a little bit annoying. But I did have the opportunity to be in the room when Chris Matthews said what he's about to say and to look at the expression on everyone's face around me. Like, cameraman, guests, the audience, and everybody there was a look of both sort of shock and surprise and concern. Here is Chris Matthews, and I will say this about Matthews, a lot of times you think like there's people who want to protect themselves or certain classes of people from having to experience increased taxes will project onto the electorate a concern that is probably not there, right? I mean, I've been saying this, like, they can talk about the Sandinistas all they want, and that's just not going to move people. If you are my age or younger, and I did meet someone the other day from Long Island who was a year older than me and did experience, having to go underneath the desks as a very, like in first grade or maybe in kindergarten because of a potential nuclear war. But he never did after that. So like, the cutoff is somewhere like around 54, 55, 53. your sort of experience of the Red Menace is really zero. I mean, you knew about the Soviet Union but Ronald Reagan came in and talked about the evil empire and made it all so cartoonish. And then by 93, the wall falls. And I will tell you this, for an 18-year-old today, the wall falling was further in the past than when I was 18 years old to World War II. And so for a lot of these people who say this stuff about I don't know about his communist, Bernie Sanders, and exaggerate that, I always think that's a surrogate. Apparently, Chris Matthews, seems to be sincere in his concern here. But I think it's a little bit much.
I have my own views of the word socialist, and I'll be glad to share them with you in private. And they go back to the early 1950s. I have an attitude about them. I remember the Cold War. I have an attitude towards Castro. I believe if Castro and the Reds had won the Cold War, there would have been executions in Central Park, and I might have been one of the ones getting executed. And certain other people would be there cheering, okay? So I have a problem with people who took the other side. I don't know who Bernie supports over these years. I don't know what he means by social. 1 week it's Denmark. We're going to be like Denmark. Okay, that's harmless. That's basically a capitalist country with a lot of good social welfare programs. Denmark is harmless.
He's pretty clearly in the Denmark category, yeah.
Are you sure? How do you know? Did he tell you that?
Well, I mean, that's what he says, and that's what his agenda calls for, right?
Yeah.
He's not calling for any...
Let's see. Let's figure that one out.
But we haven't seen a campaign yet where video of him praising the other version,
right,
which is Castro, has been used.
Well, but it
will be used.
That's a question
we haven't seen how that plays out.
Of how what the effect that has.
Well, what does he think of Castro? That's a great question. What did you think of Fidel Ismo? We all thought he was great when he first. I thought he was cheering like mad for him when he first went in, and then he became a communist and started shooting every one of his enemies.
Okay, hold those thoughts on the Cuban Revolution. I have to go back to the spin room and Democratic presidential candidate.
Okay, so if I understand this now, despite the fact that Chris Matthews was excited about Fidel early on when people, this is before that he realized that he was going to have a problem with the United States and they didn't want him to nationalize, and actually allow the Cubans to enjoy any of their natural resources. Chris Matthews' concern about Bernie Sanders seems to be that I don't know if there's any other way to read what he said, that there is at least a greater than 0% chance that Sanders gets elected and then there are extrajudicial killings that will take place. Maybe not. They wouldn't be necessarily in Central Park, but they could be. Maybe in the, like every town commons will have like a couple of people who are the biggest capitalists. And that is nuts. The idea that the people around Bernie Sanders or Bernie Sanders himself or anybody associated with the campaign or anybody associated with Sanders perceives a notion that involves executions or even just like jailings or even like ticketing. You've been too much of a capitalist. You're going to get like one of these stickers or something like this. That is just nuts. And I can't, he seems to be sincere in his concern, because it was one of those, like, I'll tell you in person what, privately what my things are. And then he goes on to basically express what those concerns are. But it also is setting the table for people to take Trump and the Republicans' portrayal of Sanders in this way seriously. Now, with that said, as ridiculous as that sounds, that's what we're going to hear from the ads. They're going to say he loves Fidel Castro, or he loved Fidel Castro, or he loved Daniel Ortega. And 70% of the voting population, at least, is going to go, what? I mean, do I think Bernie Sanders will be hurt in Florida?
Yes.
By that? Yes. Do I think Bernie Sanders will be hurt in Florida by, talking about Juan Guaido? Yeah. And if Florida was the linchpin of the election, I would say that would have some relevance. But if Florida is not. And beyond that, I think, honestly, a huge percentage of the population is just going to be completely like, what? Who? Wait, he praised somebody 40 years ago? And I'm supposed to make my decision on voting for this guy based on that? I guess it's possible. But if people are going to be moved by a statement, a videotape of a statement that Bernie Sanders made 40 years ago, and they're going to be able, the Republicans are going to be able to create this whole sort of narrative about how evil, communists are, et cetera, to a whole host of people who have no recollection even of pre-93 when the wall fell. Just imagine what they could do with Joe Biden. Or imagine what they could do with the stories about Amy Klobuchar that are out there, the way that she treated her interns. Or, true or not, imagine what they could do with Pete Buttigieg. Imagine what they could do with anybody. People are looking for, I think, one thing that's clear, that the more you go through these Democratic primaries, I think part of the reason why we have seen not huge numbers in Iowa turnout is because I think there's a significant portion of the Democratic electorate that's just like, give us a nominee. I don't care. I'm going to vote against Donald Trump. It's too hard for me to choose. I don't want to get invested in it. I got too many other things to do. Give us a nominee. I'll go out and vote for him. And then I think the people who are engaged in it, I think there's a certain percentage who are doing this on ideological grounds. Obviously, I think a huge portion of Sanders voters are voting based on ideology. I think that's probably true to a lesser extent with Warren. And then I think after that, it really just comes down to people like, I think this guy can win, or I think this woman can win. But I will tell you this right now. I've been able to now mathematically recreate what my perspective has been in terms of facing Trump. Like this whole thing, can this person go toe to toe to Trump? As if like it is, people make their decision, their minds up on these debates, like when they physically, how are they going to wrestle each other that doesn't happen. But I will say this, that I think, and this was clear basically at this time, a little bit later in 2016, which is you cannot run on your personal resume. You cannot run on what your attributes are as a person in the general election, because you are playing on Donald Trump's playing field. And he will find a way to not just mitigate and undercut that, but depress your voters based upon proving your sales pitch to them is in some way, maybe this is at the margins, in some ways a falsehood. This happened with John Kerry. He went out there. I'm going to talk about my military service. I got an award. I got a Purple Heart. I'm going up against George Bush, who basically went AWOL. And we're doing this with the backdrop of the war. And I'm going to prove my bona fides. I was a Purple Heart winner. And they swift boated him. And his campaign collapsed. If you want to figure out who's got the best chance to win, this is the mathematical formula. Determine what percentage of a candidate's message has to do with their personal attributes. When they say, I have, a legit relationship to God, and, we see where Trump going to the prayer breakfast and it was garbage, or I'm going to restore integrity, or I have good moral character, or I do X, or I do Y, or I understand this, or I understand that. et cetera, figure out and just sit down and write down one line that comes to your mind when you think about what their pitch to you is, what that candidate's pitch to you is. Figure out what percentage of their pitch is made up of that one line that comes into your head. 65%, 75%, 85%. Get that number, subtract it from 100, and then compare that to the other candidates. Whoever has the bigger number that does not involve a personal pitch as to who they are and what attributes they bring, that's how you know that Donald Trump will not be able to attack them in the same way. He will not be able, or that if he does, it won't make a difference because their value proposition to the voter is not tied up in who they are. Donald Trump can attack you if you say you have moral integrity because everybody with enough money can be exposed to have no moral integrity or a lack of enough to depress voters who have bought into the idea that you have moral integrity. But Donald Trump does not have the ability to undercut any type of policy proposal, particularly one that is actually delivering what he sort of vaguely says he's going to give to people. He just doesn't have that skill set. Democrats always win on that terrain. So keep that in mind. We will get to David Dayen in a moment. And I'll be hitting that point probably quite a bit over the next month or two. So bear with me. Oh, folks, check this out. As you know, hiring is a challenge. There is one place where you can go where hiring is simple, fast, and smart. ZipRecruiter. We gotta get in on this story because here's a story of Codable co-founder Gretchen Hebner. She went through a process where she realized how challenging hiring can be after unsuccessfully searching for a new game artist to grow with her education tech company. Then she switched to ZipRecruiter, saw an immediate difference. You can too by signing up for free at ZipRecruiter.com. /majority. ZipRecruiter doesn't depend on candidates finding you. We've talked to you about this in the past. It finds them for you. By using ZipRecruiter's screening questions to filter candidates, Gretchen found it easier to focus on the best ones than find the right one. In fact, after posting her job on ZipRecruiter, Gretchen said she was honestly surprised she found qualified applicants so quickly, hired a new game artist in less than 2 weeks. It's no wonder 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. I am one of those 4. But frankly, I got more than one. I got a dozen. And then we found Brendan, the only guy who seems to show up to work around here, is ZipRecruiter jumped out and found him. I would never use another service ever. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. See why ZipRecruiter is effective for businesses of all sizes. ZipRecruiter, you can try it now for free at ZipRecruiter.com/majority. That's ZipRecruiter.com/majority, MAJORITY, majority. ZipRecruiter.com/majority. Check it out today. I don't know what it is about President's Day, but there's some huge sales that take place around this.
Honor your presidents by, engaging with the economy.
I guess. Like every way that you've imagined your house or your apartment, your office for that matter, to look like. Doesn't matter if you're sort of a beige or a bubblegum pink type of person. Built by Joybird, designed by you. They even offer a range of kid and pet-friendly upholstery options, free fabric swatch kits that are available to let you see and touch all their fabrics, help you make the best choice. Joybird's free personal design consultants can help you with basically just your inspiration. They can take you right to actually making it happen. Each piece is made with the ultimate care and precision. All Joybird handcraft pieces come with a lifetime warranty. Plus, you get a 365-day home trial. So if you don't like it, send it back. Create furniture that matches your own fearless style at joybird.com/majority25. You can see how Joybird can make your dream space a reality today. Joybird.com/majority25. Go to joybird.com/majority25 and receive an exclusive offer. Why do we call it Majority 25? Because you get 25% off your first order by using the code Majority25. So that's joybird.com/majority25. Use the savings code Majority25. And lastly, like I say, I don't know what's going on with this time of the year. But right now, you can make your apartment, your room, your house, I don't know. Lighting is huge. Do not take the money that you've spent on furniture and whatnot and let it go to waste without good lighting. Lamps Plus has been helping customers love their everyday spaces for over 40 years. They got chandeliers, they got ceiling lights, they got table lamps, they got, what do you call it? What are those? They're not scones. What is that called?
Sconces.
Sconces. The light itself is like jewelry for the home, folks. Lamps Plus is the nation's largest lighting retailer with over 55,000 designs from top brands, and they have their own exclusive designs in lighting, home furnishings, and decor. 55,000! You don't have to guess what the designs will look like or wandering around the aisles of a big box store. Lamps Plus has videos with design tips, and all the photos on their site tell you which light fixtures or furniture pieces are featured. They also have a large selection of Minka lighting, which you can transform your home into wonderful living areas. Minka is known for designs that blend function and style using innovative materials. I am loving my table lamp I have with the built-in USB function because that's the type of guy I am. I like my light. I am always about functionality, but the lighting is awesome too. It's beautiful. It's a very sort of sleek, minimalist design. That's what I go for. And now you can get up to 50% off of hundreds of lighting styles between February 11th, that's tomorrow, and February 23rd. February 11th to February 23rd, that's up to 50% off Lamp Plus lighting fixture sale through February 23rd. Go to Lamps Plus, LAMPSPLUS, Lamps Plus.com/majority to start saving today. That's lampsplus.com/majority. Quick break. And David Dayen. We are back. Sam Cedar on the Majority Report. Sorry, folks. We farmed out all of the operations of the show today to the folks who ran the Iowa caucuses, and it's Sam Seder on the majority.
They make a compelling pitch.
Well, we got this new company, Shadow.
They could streamline your show.
There you go.
They said they could disrupt it.
Well, disrupting it, the guy who's going to come in and disrupt it right now, David Dayen, is the executive editor. Is it the executive editor or publisher of?
Executive editor. You know, you used to time the show with a clock.
Right.
But what you really needed was an app that explains to you when you should keep the show moving.
Right. Now what we do, I don't even know what time it is. The app just keeps the time and then says time for the phone call or time for the, and it's not working out well. David Dayen, the executive editor of American Prospect, here to talk about, well, let's start with Iowa and the bullshit economy, which, I mean, you know, I was making a similar point. Like, this is a dynamic you can see across businesses, and what brought us Iowa was the same sort of, like, you know, with twilight of elites on some level, but it has infected our economy. Just give us your pitch on that and see if it's disruptive.
Let's find out. So I guess where I see the connections between how this app situation unfolded and what we see in the rest of the economy is that, you know, confidence and marketing has taken precedence over quality and success in many ways. Whether you're talking about the sort of marketing to investors that, hey, we are going to take over the ride-hailing taxi industry, and we've never made money on this before, but I'm sure if you just stick with us, we will capture enough market share to do so. Or if it's marketing to customers, hey, you can see as many movies as you want for $10 a month. And this is never going to stop. There's no way that this can go wrong, even though it's way below cost and a huge savings for you. That has become a more dominant feature of our modern economy. And in this case, you have the marketing strategy of telling people they need something they don't actually need. Somehow the Iowa caucuses managed to tabulate results for 40 plus years, predating the existence of apps. Yet it was incredibly important that they get one that would be tested and coded within a matter of weeks. And not trained, the caucus organizers weren't trained on it. They had actually very little ability to even acquire the app because it was so late in getting to the App Store or the Google Play Store that it didn't pass their approvals. So you have this sort of this triumph of con artistry over productivity and quality, and then you have it in the political realm tied up to the fact that these were movers and shakers. These were big people within the Democratic Party blob, the group of operatives and consultants, and to say no to them would be simply inconceivable. And so there's this aspect of the Democratic grift put on top of how this sort of recapitulates what we see in the broader economy.
Let's just stay on the broader economy for a moment, then we'll go down to that, because I think that this notion of the grift that is going on, because in all these scenarios, somebody, and usually it's at least a group of somebodies, are walking away making a ton of cash, regardless of its failure. And as you were talking about, I was thinking about Bill Lazonick, who is that professor from UMass Business, who I've had on a couple of times over the years to talk about the stock buybacks and just sort of the relationship between capital gains taxes and stocks, and basically the C-suites and the board of directors getting paid in stocks, and it's basically creating for them and we see this in the context of like leverage buyouts too. There's like there's always this sort of side bet. Like, we don't have to really invest in the success of what is the sort of, I guess, public facing product as much as we do in enriching ourselves getting there. And what ends up in terms of that public facing product, it really is irrelevant in terms of us making money. Like, business is no longer about actually what you're producing. It's how much value you can extract out of the process that makes it look like you're producing something.
And I'm glad you bring that up in the context, because you can get caught up in just, thinking this is an outgrowth of just the sort of tech bro economy, right? That this is just something you see primarily in tech. But it's true really throughout. And, what you brought up just there with respect to leverage buyouts and how the success or failure of the business doesn't matter as long as you can engage in financial engineering to extract your profit. The financial crisis itself was built on this bullshitting that housing prices could endlessly increase forever. And that everybody would be able to sort of work their way out of any trouble by simply refinancing. That was part of this trend as well, in my view. And so this is much broader than just tech disruptors being tech disruptors. This is about sort of an economic worldview that is, not just selfish, but it relies really on con artistry, and that's, I think, the best way to describe how this went.
I mean, and to the extent that these corporations are, and these companies do this and leverage buyout, whatever, it's all a certain amount of like self-dealing, and I think that's where it comes in. I mean, because our expectations of the Democratic Party are different than what our expectations are of like a leverage buyout of whatever it is, Toys R Us or wherever it's going to be. Where just to be clear, what happens is these leverage buyout artists come in, they use the company's money to basically finance their purchase of the company, and then they extract all sorts of cash out of it for managerial services and et cetera, et cetera. And then they're like, oh, this company's got so much debt, we should just go into bankruptcy. They're protected creditors because they're employees or they're consultants or whatever it is. And that's the same sort of dynamic that seems to be going on with this acronym on some level. It's like, I've got friends, we're all sort of interconnected, and I put everybody on my board. So everybody feels comfortable that, the $75 million that we raise, everybody's going to get their own piece of it in some fashion or another. And
I mean, let's just say, Sam, you were sitting right there when this was going down on a panel on MSNBC with David Plouffe, who was made a board member of Acronym, and it was entirely to validate the entire enterprise to the types of people that would be encouraged to buy in to whatever Acronym was selling. David Plouffe's presence on that board was intended to signal that this is something that you have to deal with, right? That this is an organization that you're going to have to purchase goods and services from. And we see that in the regular economy all the time. People put on boards for those reasons, for favor granting and the ability to signal a certain cachet. And you were there when Chris Hayes asked the question, what do you know about this thing? And he like we see with Wells Fargo and all these other places that have scandals, he disclaimed any responsibility for it whatsoever. He said, this isn't my thing. I was just a volunteer. And you know, I don't know anything about anything. And you know, of course, Acronym in the aftermath said they weren't even affiliated. They were just an investor in Shadow, the app maker, when months earlier they said, hey, we're launching Shadow. They were obviously much more involved, but they were trying, you know, this sort of denial of responsibility is a major feature of this whole thing as well. And that's part of the bullshit economy too.
I mean, what are the chances? Now, it's quite possible, it seems now that I've read into it, that David Plouffe is a volunteer on the board of director, and I think he's using that in terms of like he doesn't get paid to be on the board, and I think that's
right. He's an unpaid board member because his value doesn't need to be paid with cash.
Well,
I mean, it's
there's $75 million that they control, the Acronym, as far as I can tell, right? They've been raising that. What are the chances? And what they do is they go out and then like support other organizations. What are the chances that David Plouffe does not have an organization that is not benefiting from that type of support?
Or friends of David Plouffe,
exactly.
or people in the orbit of David Plouffe. You know, people who were involved with the Obama administration or the Obama campaign in some way. I mean, this is all a network. That's how you have to think of it. And when you place someone from the network on the board, you open up all of these possibilities for the rest of the network to, you know, get paid.
And then they all, I mean, you know, conspire is maybe too big of a word, but they all are aligned in terms of an agenda to protect when there is a failure like that. So if I had the majority report fund and I had, anonymous donors pouring money into it, and I had $75 million and I give, the American Prospect $2 million as part of a grant, when I go out there,
you're welcome to do that, by the way. You're allowed to do that if you want.
When I start going, off on an Ambien bender and start tweeting about Roman Polanski again, then you could be sure that I'm going to get a very a puff piece in the American Prospect at that point, and one that lauds all the great tweets I've done over the years. Right, David? I mean, that's the way this works, essentially. And
it's favor factories, it's back scratching, and and to segue into the other thing that I wrote about last week, this all comes from the top. This all comes from the fact that Tom Perez was placed into the leadership of the DNC in order to keep this favor train rolling. And the only way that you're going to stop something like this that obviously is producing, really negative results, almost like this when you get this kind of nepotism in where who you know matters more than the quality of the product and service, you're always going to get these problems, and until you eliminate the people at the top who are facilitating it, I don't think you're going to get to anywhere good, and that's why I call for Perez to resign.
And I think the way you've framed it is really the important thing, because from an ideological perspective, Ellison was certainly different than Perez, but the issue was not, I don't think it was ever ideological for the Obama people as much as it was like, we need our guy there so that our peeps, our tribe, as it were, will have access to this, these resources. And go ahead.
It's hard to come up with another reason why that happened. If you remember back in 2017, the Democratic Party had coalesced around Keith Ellison. Chuck Schumer endorsed him. Harry Reid endorsed him. This was something that was going to be seen much like Howard Dean in 2005 when he was made DNC chair after he lost an election, but he had a base of support within the party. Much like that, Ellison sort of coming into the fold was an opportunity to sort of bring together the disparate factions and at least come up to some sort of rough unity, rough consensus. There's no reason for Obama, who clearly engineered the installation of Perez, to disrupt that, if not for some sort of fear or worry that their guys wouldn't get the same special treatment if Ellison was in charge. I mean, what else? What's the other reason? What's the other rationale for this? I don't see one.
And I think like at the time, this was something that I think people missed. People just assumed this is Obama bigfooting it because he doesn't like the ideological grounding of Ellison. But from the Democratic Party's perspective, they're thinking like, we would rather have Ellison and his what he represents ideologically.
Now they're inside the tent.
Inside the tent pissing out versus outside the tent pissing in. But
That's
Obama's people were not there because they were worried about Keith Ellison's politics. They were worried about who Keith Ellison would be giving the contracts to. And this is a dynamic that you could see in the context of the Republican Party, too. It's like it is not so much that they have an issue. Like, none of these people, like the Never Trumpers, have an issue with the Republican Party's agenda. Right? I mean, it is that they are carrying out under Trump. It's that we're no longer in the pipeline to get the largesse that we were afforded before. Money, prestige, power, money.
Right. That's right. I mean, we see where that has led us. The party is as fractured as it's been. Maybe more so than 2016, just because there aren't two polls now; there are multiple ones. The party is incompetent as it's ever been. People trying to blame. Sanders wanted the caucuses. The Sanders faction wanted the caucuses, and they brought this. Their confusing new rules brought this down upon the Iowa Democratic Party. The rules were the same. All the Sanders group wanted to do is have them show their work.
Yes.
And the fact that showing the work created such confusion and errors meant that they were always there. They were always a feature of this. And Perez agreed to keep the caucuses. The only thing that he said is that, you have to increase access for people who are unavailable on caucus night. So Iowa said, okay, we'll do this virtual caucus with some technology. And DNC said, well, this isn't going to work. You can't do this. So they knew that the Iowa Democratic Party had a problem with technology vendors, right? They knew that this could be a problem and yet allowed this app for reporting results, which is so ridiculous because Iowa has 99 counties. There is no area of Iowa that is more than 30 minutes from a county seat. You can drive in the results of any election, any caucus, into the county seat within 30 minutes. You can use the ancient technology of the paper and the car. That's all you needed to get this done. There was no need for to speed this up through any kind of technological solution. It was unnecessary. It was a solution to a non-existent problem. And yet not only did the DNC sign off on it, there is reporting that they encouraged it, that they discouraged the use of a phone tree, which might have been used in the past, citing security. But, who ends up benefiting from that, right? It's the same blob. It's the same group of elites at the party consultant level who get rich off this stuff. So, for all those reasons, and the way that Perez has disclaimed responsibility, just like Plouffe, saying, oh, well, this is Iowa's fault. This is the Iowa Democratic Party's fault. When there's also reporting that the DNC took over the tabulation process about a day after the caucuses. And only a couple days later did Perez say, oh, well, we have to do a recanvass. Enough is enough. But they were involved in the first place. This was an attempt to distance himself, even though he was completely implicated. For all those reasons, I really think that Perez has to go, and I think it's a matter of time. Actually.
Well, I think they got to get to it quick because it's going to be relevant to have a DNC head. I mean, we just lost the heads of the convention, the 2020 convention in Milwaukee. Yeah. Like, you know, if you're headed
over a bad work environment, like I don't know if it was sexual harassment or what, but it was over a toxic work environment.
This is what we call poor management, folks. And just to be clear. Also, on the whole, on the new metrics, I will just walk people through this because it'll take 1 minute. The process of doing the caucus goes like this: people come in, they vote. We'll call that vote number 1. Anybody who doesn't have 15% in terms of candidates, they get reassigned. There is vote number 2. So if you didn't fit 15% in the first vote, you go and you throw your support against somebody else. That's vote number 2. That's a number. That number gets converted into the SDEs, which is the statewide delegates. And then that number gets sent into the Iowa Democratic Party, and they do another calculation that gets statewide delegates. The only difference, the process did not change. It's just that they wrote down this time the first vote and the second vote, so that you could, like you say, see the work. And so all you needed was that same sheet of paper. You just have two other numbers on that sheet of paper, essentially.
Yeah. But look, I mean, this is a stupid system. There shouldn't have been caucuses.
I agree.
They're anti-democratic. They create, I don't think, much confusion, but obviously they create too much confusion for people running caucuses to handle. And there shouldn't be any. And the good news is that 7 states converted from caucuses to primaries this year. We're not going to see this much. The problem, of course, we see it right at the top of the election cycle because Nevada is going to do one, and Iowa, 2 of the first 3 states, are still using this archaic anti-democratic system. That was a mistake. But trying to solve the problem with technology just compounded a mistake on top of that.
And I'm quite convinced there's another story here. $60,000 or $70,000 doesn't seem worth the effort, frankly, of something like this. I have a feeling that this was like we're going to do a test pilot of this, technology, which basically amounts to, it's a calculator that sends results. Right, like how complicated could this have possibly been?
This is a high school project. I mean, that's what's so amazing about this, the fact that you could screw that up. And now Nevada is using what they're insisting is not an app, but a tool, another which is a something that goes on your tablet and that you have to use to tabulate results. It's essentially the same thing. They refuse to write it down or use an adding machine or an abacus or anything. They just they're insistent. They have to use this stuff. We're going to do some reporting on this week.
Why can't they just write it down on a piece of paper?
Same trap.
Take a picture of that paper and email it to the people at the headquarters, essentially. But all right.
I mean, there's this serious paranoia over hacking. And you can't use phones, you can't use email, but you can use an app that's connected to the internet. Apparently, that's not a problem.
Well, that's why I say send a photograph of the piece of paper. Like the ability to hack that seems to me to be rather difficult. People might be able to see it, but they can't change the number. It's just a picture. But whatever. Maybe that's what they'll do, and they just won't tell us. All right. So with all that said,
I just want to make one more point that. This has now become part of the cultural wallpaper about the Democratic Party. Like Bernie Sanders over the weekend was on Face the Nation, and it was asked to him, it's a ridiculous question, but it was asked to him, if you guys can't run the caucus properly, how are you going to run healthcare? And that's a stupid question to ask, but you do understand it at some level because people sort of get their cues about parties from these kinds of events.
Yep.
And so this was bigger than just one, misstep. It was it's threatening to define the party, a party of activist government, and that's why it's completely unforgivable.
That's right. That's right. I mean, these are not going to be the same people who are ostensibly going to be doing any of these major programs, hopefully. But
right.
Hopefully, although, who knows what their intentions were, but it creates this narrative that is beyond unhelpful. All right. So with that said, we got the primaries happening in New Hampshire. Presumably this is going to be a little bit cleaner because it is just one vote. What's the number of the vote? Maybe.
I don't know how they're going to figure it out without a map. I mean, how do you even add numbers without a map these days? I don't get it.
The question is,
good luck to New Hampshire.
The question is, how much money is being left on the table when someone hasn't come in and monetized this by saying that there's a problem in the way that we're doing this, right?
Exactly.
And this is, I mean, that again, this dynamic of like, there's dumb money there, no one holding it to account. How do I get my hands on some of that? That nothing better explains the problems with the U.S. economy and just broadly speaking, our society today. I just want to touch on this.
That's it.
What? Well, but there's an interesting dynamic that's also going on. Donald Trump is talking about, he's got 95% support now amongst Republicans. His his numbers on the economy are probably as good as they've been. The job numbers have been revised down. So it now appears that his job growth has been annually less than in the later years of the Obama administration. In some years, not too much less, but broadly less. But the unemployment rate is as low as it's been certainly since in our lifetimes. There was a story about Berlin, New Hampshire, and which used to be like the third most prosperous city in New Hampshire, about 10,000 people. They had a paper mill there. The city has been devastated. The unemployment rate is low, but and there's supposedly, jobs in the newspaper, but it's all crappy jobs. And so there's a tremendous amount of despair there. Trump almost won that city in 2016. And it's possible he could win it this time around. He used to be a Democratic style, give me your sense of like what you think is going to happen in New Hampshire and how this sort of general election is going to shape up, because it's,
right. You're asking a couple different questions. So New Hampshire, I think we have a pretty good sense of what's going to happen. Sanders looks like he's likely going to win. Buttigieg looks like he's likely going to be in second, unless the dynamic has really changed over the weekend and Klobuchar has eaten away at his vote. There is a possibility that Sanders could get even as low as 25% of the popular vote and 50% or more of the delegates, because there's this whole 15% viability threshold.
Yep.
And polling right now shows that only Sanders and Buttigieg are above that. And so if that holds, then the delegates are just awarded to those two proportionally. And that would give Sanders a majority if he's in first. So there's a sense that if the field remains a little bit fractured, even on into Super Tuesday, Sanders can continue to gain a majority of delegates without getting a majority of votes. And this is an area where the delegate math sort of works in his favor, whereas in Iowa it worked against him to a small extent. So that's one thing to look for is does anybody how many people get viable?
Right.
How many get over that 15% hump? So that's sort of the primary thing. And then, how many people are able to go on? Is Biden able to go on if he finishes fifth in New Hampshire, which is very likely, I think, at this point. Can he get to South Carolina, which he claims to be his firewall? And what does it do to him in South Carolina if he's constantly finishing this low in the first two states? So those are some of the things to watch. As far as the general is concerned, I mean, economically, I think that because it's sort of been a similar trajectory, maybe a slightly smaller trajectory from the second term of the Obama administration, Trump gets the benefit of that, just because there were already a lot of people gainfully employed, and now there are more. And he's used that, to his advantage to say, look, we're at the lowest job growth, or we're at the lowest unemployment rate in 50 years. Yeah, I mean, you're following the exact path of the previous administration, if not lower, at a lower acceleration. This is last week, because of the Iowa mess and some other factors, was the week that, the Democrats in despair narrative started to take hold about the presidential election. I think there's a long way to go. I think we certainly don't have the answer economically. And I'll just, if you think what's going to be the state of the economy come November, I'll give you one word, and that's coronavirus. Which could have a tremendous social and economic impact. I'm going to be writing about that this week. There's not enough information to really say, like, he's a safe bet or he's not. I think what we're starting to figure out is, I'd like to see some more data after Iowa. Iowa turnout turned out to be a little bit higher than the 2016 baseline. It ended up, I think, 180,000 rather than 170,000, which is pathetic. It's like 15% of the electorate that participates in caucuses. I think we need more data. We need to see what the turnout looks like in New Hampshire, and then on Super Tuesday. But there is these sort of Democrats in despair narratives tend to sort of fold in on themselves, and there's a deep correlation between the question, who do you think will win the election, and who wins the election, whether that's a bandwagon effect or what. Perception can become reality to a certain extent. And so we'll have to see how that plays out with as the primary goes on.
Do you have another 5 minutes? I know you got to go soon. Do you have another 5?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
All right.
Yeah.
Two things. One, quick response on this. What do you think about the theory that there's a significant portion of Democrats who are just like, I don't care who the nominee is. I'm not going to turn out and just pick somebody so I can vote against Trump, as explaining why the numbers weren't off, the chart. Because we saw young people beat 2008 significantly in Iowa. Right. And presumably they're excited to vote for Sanders for the most part, but maybe other candidates as well. And, they're more engaged, and that maybe older people were just like, look, I'm going to vote for the Democrat. I don't feel like getting out of the house today. And particularly because it's a caucus. That's the first thing.
Maybe, but how does that align with the midterms? Like midterm primaries, I thought were even in the primaries were pretty high turnout. And that was a situation of, I don't care who the Democrat is, as long as I can vote against a Republican.
I don't know if we saw that with midterm primaries, huge numbers, but I think that's also, it could be just an easier decision, right? Like, I'm going to go and engage in this because I only know one candidate. Now I think it's just, I don't know. That's a theory. I guess we need more data on that. But here's the other thing.
Yeah.
It seems to me like Mike Bloomberg is really the biggest winner of all of this, at least in terms of, to the extent that you want to think about those lanes, because he is the one guy of, whether it's, Buttigieg has a lot of money, But Buttigieg, Klobuchar, Biden in particular, even if we want to throw Warren in there on some level, they're all going to have money problems getting past, whatever it is, Super Tuesday. The only person who won't is Mike Bloomberg. He never has to leave the race. And it seems to me like there's just like a quiet coalescing around him in some way. And maybe coalescing is the wrong word. He has a certain magnetic attraction that involves, again, money. He's just throwing money everywhere. I keep hearing stories of like people leaving the Biden campaign because they're getting, 1.7x of what you would get, being paid for Biden or anybody else. And that, you see all these people who are getting these endorsements because they all, it's like, who says no to a billionaire? Because you think that like, maybe if I just stand next to him, he drops $100,000 on the ground.
I think you're right. I think it's very dangerous. There's a piece by Nathan Robinson in Current Affairs that said, I keep hearing people around me saying they're looking at Bloomberg, and I feel like I'm in the Ionesco play The Rhinoceros, where all of a sudden everybody around me is turning into a rhinoceros, and I don't understand why. This is, as you said, the attraction of money, the power of money, and let's just say, I mean, this is not a perfect comparison, and people are going to knock me for it, but, I remember 4 years ago when everybody was like, well, you would never have a Trump in the Democratic Party. That a Trump figure could never take over the Democratic Party. And I'm not calling Michael Bloomberg Trump, but what I'm saying is this is someone who is buying his way into politics, number one, and number two, expresses a large range of views that are diametrically opposed to the party that he is now purporting to represent. This is a guy who spoke at the 2004 Republican National Convention, defended George W. Bush, supported Scott Brown with a lot of money in his race against Warren, supported Pat Toomey with a lot of money in his races, has supported busting teachers' unions all over the country, thought that we should do nothing on financial regulations after the financial crisis. This is someone with views that are completely diametrically opposed to where the Democrat Party is today. And just because he has money and a lot of people's brains have been broken by Trump, and they think, well, let's get our billionaire in there against their billionaire. This threat is real, and we will see if a Trump figure can take over the Democratic Party.
David Dayen, executive editor of the American Prospect at prospect.org. Folks, head over there. If you have not subscribed to the Prospect or checked it out in the past year.
Prospect.org/subscribe, please. We can't continue to do this without reader support. That's the way of the world in media these days. You know it as well as anyone, Sam. And we really do need your support. And we had our best week of traffic that in my tenure and maybe in many, many years last week during Iowa. We're doing great stuff, and we really need your support to keep going. Prospect.org/subscribe.
David, thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
Honestly, folks, the Prospect has completely had a massive refresh under Dayen. If you've listened to this program for any period of time, you know the esteem I hold for Dayen personally. I mean, the stuff I've seen him do. In fact, he was the first guy. When I was the executive editor of the Air America website, Dorsey, do you remember this?
I do.
We had no budget, of course, because Mark Green was like, you're going to have $1 million budget, and which turned out to be, you have $1 budget. And one of the things we did was basically took the feed from the blogs that different people wrote, and Dayen was the first guy. I was like, and we paid him. I don't think it was much, but we did pay him some money. But we just basically populated the front page with his feed and stuff from the shows. But the Prospect has been amazing, and they've also had these situations where it's they've done this amazing sort of full issue thing on what a president can do on day one, not with executive orders, but just based upon the laws that exist now. And then that was the day that I don't know, Trump, either was impeached or, farted or whatever it was. And then, there's been a whole host of stuff that you go back for the last 3 or 4 or 5 months and read the Prospect. And, honestly, if you're thinking about what media outlet you can support after, of course, the Majority Report, head over to the Prospect because they're doing some amazing stuff over there. And if they had the resources to do more stuff, it would be even more amazing stuff. That said, I want to remind you, this program relies on your support. You can become a member by going to jointhemajorityreport.com. And when you do, you not only are supporting the free show, you not only get it without ads, you also get extra content every day, particularly every day that we're live. And, occasionally we get bonuses that we put behind the wall. We're going to try and do more of that. Now our chief technology officer, Kyle, has developed an in-house mechanism for us to provide members-only video delivered in the feed. I'm not exactly sure how this is going to even work, but we're going to try and introduce a couple of little small features that'll just hopefully you'll enjoy. Join themajorityreport.com. Check it out today. Also, the AM Quickie, it's exploding. It is literally exploding.
In a good way, like a firework,
right.
Not like a, Hindenburg.
Right. It's exploding in a good way. It's growing. Let's put it that way. Maybe not exploding. But AM Quickie, you can head to amquickie.com or you can access it via the app. It is about 5-6 minutes every morning. We get it out the door by 8. And it is a great way to set the table for the day. And, if you have one of those days I just can't listen to politics today, but I also want to make sure that I know what's going on, this is the way to do it. amquickie.com. Also, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. Check out Michael Brooks' show at patreon.com/TMBS. Check out the Antifada at patreon.com/the Antifada. Jamie's up in New Hampshire now. We can have Jack call in from New Hampshire too?
I think that's the plan, yeah.
Today or tomorrow?
Tomorrow.
Okay, great.
Yeah, we got a few of the greater MR universe up there.
Yeah. And also a literary hangover available at patreon.com/literary hangover. Matt's, reading poems from the 17th century. Nobody else is doing it. He's basically saving our culture. One podcast episode at a time. See you in the fun half. Left is best. Jamie and I may have a disagreement.
Yeah, you can't just say whatever you want about people just because you're rich.
I have an absolute right to mock them on YouTube.
He's up there buggy whipping like he's the boss.
I am not your employer.
I'm tired of the negativity.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to upset you. You're nervous? You're a little bit upset? You're riled up?
Yeah, maybe you should rethink your defense of that, you fucking idiots.
We're just going to get rid of you.
All right.
But dude. You want to smoke this joint?
Yes.
Do you feel like you are a dinosaur?
That's some good shit.
Exactly. I'm happy now.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win.
Oh, hell yeah.
Now listen to me. 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 847-906-5014. 57 238 56, 27, 1/2, 5 eighths, 3.9 billion.
Wow.
He's the ultimate math nerd.
Don't you see?
Why don't you get a real job instead of spewing vitriol and hatred, you left-wing Limbaugh?
Everybody's taking their dumb juice today.
Come on, Sammy.
Dance, dance, dance. Rand Paul. I had my first post-coital scene with a woman. I'm hoping to add more moves to my repertoire. All I have is the dip and the swirl.
Fine, we can double dip.
Yes, this is a perfect moment.
No.
Wait, what?
You make under $1 million a year. You're scum. You're nothing.
Excuse me? Fuck you, you fucking liberal elite. I think you belong in jail.
Thank you for saying that, Sam. You're a horrible, despicable person.
All right, gonna take a quick break. I want to take a moment to talk to some of the libertarians out there. Take whatever vehicle you want to drive to the library. What you're talking about is jibber jabber.
Classic. I'm feeling more chill already.
Good. Donald Trump can kiss all of our asses.
Hey, Sam. Hey, Andy. You guys ready to do some evil?
Hitler was such an idiot.
I think I might be a Nazi.
Agreed.
No.
Death to America.
You.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow, that's weird. No way! Unbelievable. This guy's got a really good hook. Throw our hands up. Wow.
But Sam, I gotta get off.
No worries. Let's. I want to just flesh this out a little bit. I mean, look, it's a free speech issue. If you don't like me,
Hey, shut up!
Thank you for calling into the Majority Report. Sam will be with you shortly.
we are back, ladies and gentlemen. It is the Majority Report. I'm going to go and set up all our little things because, of course, I didn't do that during the break. I know I should have, but I just didn't do it. I'm going to turn on the IM machine. And what better to start off the fun half than hearing a Joe Bidenism from Joe Biden, who very well may be in the final stages of his election. Just remind me to get to, we had a caller the other day who was talking about the Culinary Institute having such a culinary union in Vegas, having a very strong healthcare plan. And subsequent to that call, I saw a report that said that they are contemplating. They're basically telling their members they have a problem with Warren and Sanders because of that. So what the heck? Got some weird spam on that. Weird spam on the IM. All right. Meanwhile, Joe Biden's in New Hampshire, still seems to be campaigning, and is dropping significantly in the polls. I think like the sheen is off. If there was ever a sheen, the patina, as it were. And here he is. He's still as cantankerous as ever, still building bridges, Joe Biden.
Hi, my name is Madison, and I'm an econ student at Mercer University. And, oh, awesome. So I'm going to be a little bit, okay? So.
A little bit what? What happened?
So you're arguably the candidate with the greatest advantage in this race. You've been the vice president, weren't burdened down by the impeachment trials. So, in the participation. So how do you explain the performance in Iowa, and why should the voters believe that you can win the national election?
It's a good question. Number one, Iowa's a Democratic caucus. You ever been to a caucus? No, you haven't. You're a lying dog-faced pony soldier. You said you were, but you're now you got to be honest. I'm going to be honest with you.
Wait, what?
You're a lion, dog-faced pony soldier, which a little rudimentary research led me down a John Wayne path. I believe it's a John Wayne quote.
And they couldn't even verify that, actually.
No?
It was an actual
And what is he? What is that supposed to mean? What's he saying there? He doesn't believe that he thinks she's a plant? I mean, come on. Of course. Everybody who's asking a question has an agenda at these things. That's exactly what you do.
Mm-hmm.
He's being asked, why you think, how you going to do in the national election, and he seems very, very sensitive.
Yeah.
For a guy who's, a guy who says, "Come on, guy."
Yeah.
Come on, man.
When his back's against the wall, the bravado doesn't play the same way as when he's sort of like, at the front of things.
Yeah, exactly.
When he's leading the pack.
I don't think that's going to work. Here is Bernie Sanders on Chris Wallace, and to a certain extent, I think what we're seeing now is Sanders is starting to try out some themes in certain areas as to what are going to be responses when Donald Trump says you're a socialist. Crazy Bernie wants to give everything for free. Now, he can't say that, right? He can't really say part of what Sanders' agenda is, because he doesn't want to remind people that Sanders is offering you things that I also offered you, like good things, right? That's the message that Sanders, good things. Because even when you say, particularly in a general election, like, wait a second, can he really deliver? People are over, like, I'm sorry. The question of whether we can afford it or we can get it or this and that is going to be trumped always, forgive the pun, by the promise of what you're going to get. Now, I think there's a very good argument that from a negotiating standpoint, you reach for the stars and you hope maybe you get to the stars. But if not, maybe you just get to the planets. Still better than being stuck, maybe 15 feet off the ground. But nevertheless, here is one of the things that I think Sanders is trying out in terms of response to the label, like, you're a socialist.
But here's the question. In a general election where you're going to need the support not just of liberal, progressive, left-wing Democrats, but you're also going to need the support of independents, even conceivably some moderate Republicans, how do you overcome not the communist label, but the socialist label, which Joe Biden said, not Donald Trump?
Right. That's fair enough, Chris. And I want to make 2 points on that. Number one, in many respects, we are a socialist society today. We have a huge budget, puts money into all areas. Now, Donald Trump, before he was president, as a private business person, he received $800 million in tax breaks and subsidies to build luxury housing in New York. Now, what does that mean when the government gives you $800 million in tax breaks and subsidies? The fossil fuel industry, whose product happens to be destroying our planet right now, receives tens and tens of billions of dollars in tax breaks and subsidies. So does the pharmaceutical industry. The difference between my socialism and Trump's socialism is I believe that government should help working families, not billionaires. So I believe that health care is a human right. I believe we should raise the minimum wage to a living wage of $15 an hour. I believe, in fact, that the rich must start paying their fair share of taxes when you have massive levels of income and wealth inequality.
But Senator, let me ask you about some aspects specific.
It goes on to talk about specifics of the plan. We can go to that.
But that's good. I mean, I think that's basically the structure. That's what he's going to say. Socialism means government doing stuff. Under Trump's vision, the government just pays off private businesses so that they can make profits. Under my version of socialism, actual people are going to get benefit. I mean, and there's, It's very hard to argue with that. You look at just the way that we got out of the housing crisis. Obama had two choices. Now granted, this happened when he was just the president-elect, but don't ask me. Barney Frank said that Paulson, who was the Treasury Secretary at that time, said, we're happy to pay off homeowners directly, and they can give the money to the banks, as opposed to giving money to the banks and hoping that the banks then pass on that relief to homeowners. And Paulson said, I'll sign off on this. Bush will sign off on it, but we need to get Obama to sign off on it because he's the next president. Barney Frank went to Obama and said, here's the deal. And Obama said, there's only one president at a time. Pass. And that may be the excuse he gave, but if you are given the opportunity and you feel strongly about it, that we should give the relief to the homeowners and allow the homeowners to then make the banks whole on their loans, that's what you would say if you're given the opportunity to do that. You wouldn't to defer to some procedural reason why you can't do the relief, that you will go to the default thing that's going to pay the banks and supposedly they're going to provide the relief, that the flow of the money is going to go that way, because it didn't. And it was like, who do we give the option to? The banks to decide to be nice, or the homeowners who are obligated to provide to the banks? And that's the story of our economy. The government picks winners and losers every single day and has since day one of its existence. The question is not whether the government is going to pick winners and losers. The question is who's going to be the winners and who are going to be the losers. That's it. Anybody who tells you anything different is lying to you, because they like who are the winners now. And so they're going to pretend it's not happening. And that seems to be the argument that that Bernie is at least trying out right now. I'm here for that. I like that. Let's go to the phones. Calling from a 702 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? 702.
Hey, Sam, it's Bro Flamingo from Las Vegas.
Bro Flamingo from Las Vegas. You're basically just, you're a couple of days away from being at the center of the universe.
Yeah, I'm excited for it. Also went to a meeting. I'm ready to caucus. So, but I'm not too thrilled about the upcoming, let's just be honest about it. The upcoming DNC chicanery is probably going to go on during the caucus, but I'll do my best.
I understand. I mean, I'm not convinced it's chicanery as much as it is just incompetence that is bred from a certain sort of generic corruption. But your mileage may vary. But go ahead.
No, actually, Sam, I agree. I agree. But the thing is, though, that the result is the same: to disempower voters.
Yes.
And make them feel alienated, affected. So, because I think, to be fair, because I'm actually on the same track as you. There's no grand conspiracy per se, because these guys are too stupid anyway to get it done. But just kind of the coalescing of forces, the grift, the arch nemesis of Bernie Sanders and stuff. But I actually wanted to just kind of expound upon your point where, we're seeing the DNC pull out all the stops to stop us from really winning. And I kind of get the feeling, because look, at the end of the day, Buttigieg doesn't have any legs in the South anymore. So this is almost like a distraction. I really think, to your point, Sam, when you talk with Mr. David Dayen, it's going to be Bloomberg at the end of the day. I feel like it's going to be the final guy, the final boss in the room.
Yeah, I agree.
Because, I don't think Biden is going to go anywhere either. But we have to be so vigilant, because I went to the DSA meeting, Sam. Here's the crazy part. When I went to DSA, it was great, by the way. I had a really good time. But the feeling I got from a lot of the canvassers there, Sam, it was very interesting because I told them my experience because I don't go canvas. I have to work a lot. But when I talk to people online or, of all stripes, I get the most pushback from DNC people, not DNC people, but the establishment people like, oh, Biden's a moderate, Buttigieg or Warren. When you talk to Trump people or people who are not really politically active, they're more receptive to Bernie Sanders. And the canvassers kind of reflected my same thing, but they're actually talking to actual people where the people who are voted for Trump or, not politically leading, they're more receptive to Bernie Sanders, whereas the opposite, where we talk to the people who are invested into the Democratic Party, these guys give the most pushback. Oh, Bernie's a socialist. Oh, we need a moderate, the X, Y, and Z. There are forces in the Democratic Party. I mean, I know it's a duh, Sam, but we're going to get the most pushback from them. I don't think it's going to be from the Trump guys. I don't think it's going to be from, Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, I think that's true right now. I think the timing is we're in the middle of a primary. And I think there are people who feel like they're going to lose something if Sanders wins, right? They're going to, and I don't know who the people you're talking about, but certainly within sort of the establishment circles, I think there's a lot of people who are going to get sort of boxed out because he is just not, he is operated largely outside of these circles. I mean, and I've never really totally understood the mentality of somebody like, he's not a Democrat. Well, it's okay. So what? It's just it's literally just a coat you put on it's one thing to say he's not a Democrat, but Michael Bloomberg has been a Republican within, as of 8 years ago. I mean, right? And so, and Michael Bloomberg has pursued Republican policies. He has endorsed George W. Bush. He endorsed the war on terror. You don't hear that in the context of Bloomberg. People don't bring it up. They never say he's not even a Democrat. That to me is bizarre. That distinction. But I think it's because Bloomberg does not threaten to upend the apple cart in the way that Sanders does. And I will say this, and I don't think they're going to bring it up during the primary. But if anybody does not realize that in this era of polarization, where being a Republican, the primary, and I'm talking about in terms of Republican now, in terms of political party, the primary directive of being a Republican is to hate anything that's Democratic, right? We've seen the studies where here is every aspect of the Affordable Care Act. How do you rate it? Oh, I give it higher ratings. As soon as they call it Obamacare, it sinks, right? And the idea that Bernie Sanders is going to be able to go into a general election and be perceived by some of the electorate as having been an independent is going to end up being a strength in the general, where it may hurt him in the Democratic primary.
And one more thing, Sam, I'll jump. By the way,
you broke up. Say that again?
Hatred at this point. No, I'm sorry. I said you're absolutely correct because I read that book by Ann Nelson, The Shadow Network. It's all about hatred at this point. It's not even about policy anymore.
Yep.
With the right wing. It's about hatred. And one more thing, Sam, and I'll jump. It's my final thing. It's so important, guys, for the listeners, and you said this, Sam, but Sanders has to win because you've been hitting home a point, Sam, and this is really, really important. Sanders has to win because once he gets into the presidency, we have to kick these consultant out. They are really, really toxic and parasitic and just downright incompetent at what they do. So it's so important that we just clean house and get the trash out of here because I'm sick of it. Listen, guys, Bernie 2020, let's get it. See you later, Sam.
Appreciate the call, Bro Flamingo in Las Vegas, ladies and gentlemen. Let's do this. Let's do a couple more from the debate from the other night in New Hampshire. I think, I think there was various different people who did well in the debate. I think really the top line is it seemed like Klobuchar got the most out of the debate and got the most at the expense of Pete Buttigieg, which from the perspective of someone who is hoping that that Sanders pick up support or is able, that New Hampshire is helpful to Sanders, that is sort of the best case scenario. And that presumes, of course, that Biden is already faltering. Here is Pete Buttigieg's defense of his South Bend, the record of policing in South Bend. And, kudos to to Lindsay Davis, who was asking the questions, because she did not let him. It really is amazing to listen to this guy answer a question, because he really is. This consultant speak is so fascinating. And I have to say that I think there's been a real failure by the political entrepreneur class to not create like one of those Buttigiegisms generator where you just plug in any question and it just comes back with a platitude. Like, I don't know how you guys have failed to create one of those websites. I don't know who needs to hear this, but this should be easy for somebody. But it's all just sort of, we've got to go backwards to go forwards. And then we'll find ourselves in a place that is actually beyond where we would have been. And that's what we need to do to get this country on the right track. Like, I feel like every answer is a derivation of that.
He had a good one during his town hall on Thursday, which was, and then he posted it to his social media accounts, which is, the shape of our democracy is the issue that affects every other issue.
That's true. I mean, it's the shape of our democracy. It's such a weird sort of, I don't even know what that means. Like, the health of our democracy? Does he mean?
No, the shape of
the
it.
shape.
Like the arc of, righteousness, or whatever Obama said, the arc of the universe.
He's trying to come up with his own. Like, we got to A/B test this. But here is his response to something that's actually real. And that is his failure as mayor to not just lower listen to this.
I want to turn now to criminal justice. Mayor Buttigieg, under your leadership as mayor, a black resident in South Bend, Indiana, was 4 times more likely to be arrested for marijuana possession than a white resident. Now, that racial disparity is higher than the rest of the state. In fact, it's higher than the rest of the nation. And that disparity increased in South Bend after you took office. When talking about the problem on national terms, you have called it, quote, evidence of systemic racism. But you were mayor for 8 years, so weren't you, in effect, the head of the system? And how do you explain that increase in black arrests under your leadership?
Well, the reality is, on my watch, drug arrests in South Bend were lower than the national average, and specifically to marijuana, lower than in Indiana. But there is no question that systemic racism has penetrated to every level of our system, and my city was not immune. I took a lot of heat for discussing systemic racism with my own police department, but we've got to confront the fact that there is no escaping how this is part of all of our policies. Earlier, we were talking about opioids, and thankfully, America has come to a better understanding about the fact that opioid addiction is best understood as a medical problem. But there were a lot of people, including a lot of African-American activists in my community, who have made the very good point. It's great that everybody's so enlightened about drug policy now when it comes to opioids, but where were you when it came to marijuana? Where were you when it came to the crack epidemic in the 1990s? That is one of the reasons why I am calling for us as a country to take up those reforms that end incarceration as a response to possession, and make sure that we legalize marijuana, and when we do it retroactively with expungements to correct the harm done in so many cases of incarceration, disproportionately.
I pause it for just 1 second because he's just about to finish, and I just want to just remind you that he is so far from where the question started that he's got to be thinking like mission accomplished. This is what you do as a politician. Like, I know this is what David Plouffe did when Hayes was asking him about like his relationship to acronym. It's just like you start there and you just immediately go off. And the idea is like, oh, everybody's forgotten what the question is. The question was, how come when you entered into the mayorship, the thing that you decry, which is the outsized ratio of arrests of black people for drugs, increased from where it was before you were mayor. And now he's on to like the idea of in the future, we've got to expunge the records of people who apparently, like, I was mayor when they got arrested for pot smoking. But kudos again to the questioner, Lindsay Davis, because this.
Expungements to correct the harm done in so many cases of incarceration, disproportionately of black and brown Americans, where the incarceration did far more harm.
Right. I
than
want
the
to go
offense it
back
was
to the original
intended to deal with.
question, though. How do you explain the increase in black arrests in South Bend under your leadership for marijuana possession?
And again, the overall rate was lower.
No, there
than
was
the
an
national
increase.
rate.
The year before you were in office, it was lower. Once you became in office in 2012, that number went up. In 2018, the last year that we have a record for, that number was still up.
Yeah. And one of the strategies that our community adopted was to target when there were cases where there was gun violence and gang violence, which was slaughtering so many in our community. Burying teenagers, disproportionately black teenagers. We adopted a strategy that said that drug enforcement would be targeted in cases where there was a connection to the most violent group or gang connected to a murder. These things are all connected, but that's the point. So are all of the things that need to change in order for us to prevent violence and remove the effects of systemic racism, not just from criminal justice, but from our economy, from health, from housing, and from our democracy.
So if we are to understand what Buttigieg is saying, is that the reason why drug arrests went up is because now they connected it to gangland murders. And that's why we started targeting people for drug arrests when they were involved with murder. And that's why the figure went up, which means that there were like even more murders that did not involve that's not possible, folks, unless South Bend is like, you know, I don't know, like a Honduras. It's like the most dangerous city in the world. Like you can't walk down the streets without there being a murder.
Yeah, when you go to Notre Dame, actually, my cousin told me when you do a tour, they give you all flak jackets when you walk around.
I mean, that's the only way to explain what he said. But the important thing for you to walk away is it's all connected. Everything's connected. And therefore, it's connected to our democracy. And things that are connected to our democracy need to change. That way, everything that's connected will also change.
That's and then the shape of the democracy begins a whole new form.
Once you change the shape of democracy, and then he's got to do the sort of the exclamation with the hands that shows that he understands the heft of the problem. Because he's communicating to you. He understands this is a heavy problem. And once you find the shape of it and the weight and the connectivity, that connectivity is what makes things connected. And therefore, if you fix one part of it, because it's connected, you'll have fixed the other part of it. But we can't go back unless it's in the process of going forward. And that's what I want for America. Yeah. That's how I would have run in the Libertarian primary. Yep. It's too bad, too. How fun would it have been to go up in these Libertarian debates and just do like a Pete Buttigieg? Here is Amy Klobuchar, and I will say this was her, this was like the first time I heard her where she expressed at least some type of agenda, frankly. Right? That was just like, as opposed to like, I'm not going to do what they're doing because that's too much.
Yeah, she's offering something.
Here she's offering something. But again, on some level, the attempt here, and see if you see this, and this is what I think is going to be problematic in the general election. You cannot tie in your agenda into some special magic about you as an individual. Listen to this.
Senator Klobuchar. In Koki's memory, let me answer this question. We may have lost an election in 2016, Democrats, but we did not lose hope. And there is a way. It's actually based on a National Academy of Science report, and I've used that to put together a plan to reduce child poverty in half in 10 years and eradicate it in a generation. We can do it with investment in childcare. We can do it with investment in preschool and school, and we can do it with tax credits, and we can get it done. But to get it done, we have to be able to reach those voters that we lost in this state and across the country. There's an old story of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and when he died, his body was put on a train and went up across America. And there was a guy standing by those tracks along with so many Americans, and he had his hat on his chest and he was sobbing. And a reporter said, "Sir, did you know the president?" And the guy says, "No, I didn't know the president, but he knew me. He knew me." And I will tell you this, there is a complete lack of empathy in this guy in the White House right now. And I will bring that to you. If you have trouble stretching your paycheck to pay for that rent, I know you, and I will fight for you. If you have trouble deciding if you're going to pay for your child care or your long-term care, I know you, and I will fight for you. If you have trouble figuring out if you're going to fill your refrigerator or fill your prescription drug, I know you, and I will fight for you. I do not have the biggest name up on this stage. I don't have the biggest bank account. I'm not a political newcomer with no record, but I have a record of fighting for people. I'm asking you to join us at amyklobuchar.com. I'm asking you to believe that someone who totally believes in America can win this, because if you are tired of the extremes in our politics and the noise and the nonsense, you have a home with me. Please, New Hampshire, I would love your vote, and I would love the vote of America.
So this really appealed, as far as I could tell, just from what we've read in terms of what her numbers have looked like in New Hampshire, from what I saw in that room of like, I don't know, there was about 300 people up in New Hampshire watching the debate, and there was a lot of support for her after this. There's a couple of things in terms of how I would critique this. And again, I think her rise is helpful for my preferred candidates, frankly, or candidate in this specific instance. But one, the notion of we need to get back these voters we lost. All the data shows that to the extent that there were voters that we lost, the Obama to Trump voters, there was also a bunch of Obama to no one voters. And the Obama to Trump voters tended to be more conservative. We're not getting them back, ladies and gentlemen. It is the Obama to nobody voters, and it's the nobody to nobody voters that we need to get. That is, and I think there's a big story coming out with Politico that does a survey of like a 10,000 or 12,000 non-voters. And I think we're going to get a sense of that. It's really this big debate whether this is an election of persuasion or of mobilization. Getting people who already agree with your agenda to feel that it's worth their time to vote, as opposed to getting people who have heretofore not agreed with your agenda to believe in your agenda. Now, Donald Trump is at 95% favorability with Republicans. I don't think you're going to convince those people. I think the 5%, if they're not on board with Trump now, they're not going to be. And they're either, even if they sit it out, fine. The other thing when she says, I'm empathetic, I know you. I mean, can you hear what Donald Trump is going to say? I can. You weren't so empathetic for the people working in your office. When you threw the phone. She's not empathetic. She doesn't care about these people. Do you see where we are already in just 3 short sentences? We're not at what it is she was offering the American public. What she was offering the American public was some measure of empathy. No, don't make it about you. Do not make it about you, because if you do, you're going to be in big trouble, because Donald Trump is a professional smear merchant. You've got to make it just about what the American public will get. Not because you're empathetic, not because you have high morals, not because you have integrity, but because this is the plan. Here it is. That's what we're offering. You make it about, I mean, Sanders very well situated for this, obviously, because it's not about me. It's about us, right? And he is pretty emphatic. He has been quite on message. So you start to look for that in every interview that he gives. You start to realize that nothing that he's offering is contingent upon him being anything other than the person who's saying the words. It's not like I understand the American public. And if you look at like all his town halls, he's not up there saying I am you. No, he's simply saying you are you. Come up here. Here's the microphone. Tell us about it. That's the strategy, anyways. Let's go to the phones. Calling from a 314 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, this is Jennifer from St. Louis.
Jennifer from St. Louis. What's on your mind?
Two things. Another perspective on the Cold War, being a Gen Xer. I am on the verge of being 52. And I did do dive under your desk drill in two different locations, but I think it might have been kind of a governmental, also strategic target consideration, because my hometown in Michigan had a very large Dow chemical plant in it. And so I have a feeling that the government, even the local government, went, yeah, we might be getting a bomb if something goes down. And so they included it in the public school safety program. And then the second place I lived where I did that was in Houston, Texas, which is like petrochemical center of the universe. That's why we were there, because there were jobs there. So I'm thinking there might be a geographical difference.
That's very possible.
In our experiences. And then the other thing I wanted to ask you is, so I got into a text conversation with a friend of mine from New York, and he's a Democrat, but he's feeling it for Bloomberg.
Right.
And I kind of, was like, well, how come you think that? And, his reasoning was he's got the money, and that he's got the business and political connections to convince the oligarchs and the GOP that their results with a strong rule of law government is going to be better is with a kind of oligarch heavy controlled situation.
Jesus. Well, that is,
and I know
that is disturbing. So the idea is that Bloomberg is going to say, look, guys, the reason why I support Bloomberg is because he's going to be being able to convince our overlords that they're going to do just as well with him as they do with Trump. I mean, on some level, I believe that. And there was a piece I saw where there was some like that, that Michael Bloomberg took Donald Trump on in New York, and nothing could be further from the truth. Michael Bloomberg turned New York into essentially like use Trump's model, right? I mean, Trump had two features as a New Yorker per se. Like one was paying to create a sense of racism in the city, like to promote racism, taking out a full-page ad on the Central Park 5. And the second was essentially corrupting the government, and you know, to be fair, it had always been corrupted in this way, to basically price out people from living into the city by turning housing into a luxury commodity. And Michael Bloomberg's tenure in New York was like an homage to those two things. You had stop and frisk maintained, and you had New York basically turned into a gated community, not necessarily physically gated, although there was some of that, but specifically like excluding people who were anything but extremely wealthy, and that is Bloomberg's legacy.
It seems like that has continued, like the trickle-down effects of that. Like I have a friend who lives in the Bronx, and because the subway service has deteriorated so badly, at least to where he lives, he now goes and gets on a Metro North train to get into the city, into like the theater district, to get to work. Like it's faster for him to get on a Metro North train than it is to get on an MTA train. And to me, that's kind of, and plus all the police crackdown and stuff.
To be honest with you, that is more of a Cuomo problem, frankly, than a Bloomberg.
Not a city.
But nevertheless, you know,
But I don't know. How do I get this guy to see that? Like, I immediately thought
Jennifer, if somebody says, Jennifer, if somebody says, I'm going to vote for the oligarch who is going to convince the other oligarchs that he'll be a better oligarch than that other oligarch, your time is better spent calling into a different state, into people you don't know. Appreciate the call.
Okay.
Appreciate the call. Honestly, like I don't know how that his assessment of what Bloomberg might say and do, I think, is fairly accurate. It's just that, like, that's the guy you want to vote for? Right? I mean...
Yeah. Doesn't seem to have too much faith in representative democracy at the end of the day.
And I would also say that, like, okay, you've convinced the oligarchs, but it's not like they're going to have more than one vote. Like, you know, you're still going to just go out there. It's not like Bloomberg needs their resources, right? I don't know how convincing the oligarchs that he's a better oligarch necessarily translates into a victory in Wisconsin and Michigan. And I don't know. I don't see how that happens. Calling from a 614 area code. Who's this?
I don't know. I don't see how that happens.
614.
Calling from a 614 area code. Who's this? I don't know. I don't see how that happens.
Okay. Echo chamber. Calling from a 210 area code. Who's this? Where you calling from?
Good afternoon, Sam. It's John from San Antonio.
John from San Antonio. Thank you so much for your help last week. I know we didn't get back to you for the second hit, but that was because there was no results, John.
Yeah, that's fine. That's cool. I didn't actually call in, so I mean, that's cool.
All right.
So Bernie Sanders hit or surpassed polling expectations in the first round of voting, which he won by 3.4 points over Buttigieg. This metric will be the primary voting mode in all states but 2 and in 4 territories that still have caucuses left. So even if after the second round lead, in the voter percentage, he was at 1.4 points. Unfortunately, the caucus was riddled with errors, and Sanders' campaign have requested a partial recanvass of the results. The Iowa Democratic Party released the results of delegates that will go to the national convention, and they are as follows: Buttigieg 14, Bernie 12, Warren 8, Biden 6, and Klobuchar 1. So Bernie is only down by 2 statewide delegate equivalents in the out, or by 0.1%, and Bernie's only down by 1.04 in District 3, and that could possibly flip also. So polling in New Hampshire looks even better for Bernie than it did in Iowa. I have Bernie at 27%, Buttigieg at 20%, and all other candidates under 15 in statewide totals. So if the polling is right, only 2 candidates will receive the 8 delegates that are allocated for the statewide totals, and those are Bernie. So Emerson College is the only poll that breaks down percentages by congressional districts. Each of those 2 districts allocate 8 delegates to the national convention. And in last night's Emerson poll, Bernie leads 35%, 35% of the vote in District 1. Buttigieg gets 20, Klobuchar's at 13, below the 15% threshold for receiving delegates. District 1 includes the greater Manchester area.
All right, hold on, John. Let me ask you a question. John, let me ask you a question. There are statewide delegates, and there are delegates that are distributed based upon the congressional district. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay, and so there is in the statewide. Statewide does not necessarily match, obviously, the districts. Some people are going to overperform in certain districts and whatnot. So from a statewide perspective, in your mind, what would you predict? What percentage of the vote, of the delegates, the 8 delegates, do you think Sanders will get?
I think he'll get 5, and I think Buttigieg will get 3.
Okay, and then how many congressional districts do we have in New Hampshire?
2.
Okay, and so in those 2 districts, how many does each represent in terms of delegates?
8 apiece.
8.
For a total of 24 delegates.
Okay,
yeah,
so
24,
and do you think it's going to go 5-3 in those districts as well?
No, I think Bernie Buttigieg is actually leading in District 1. I think it's going to go 5-3 also. So that's going to give Bernie at 10 so far. But District 1, and like I said, Klobuchar's at 13. District 2, Buttigieg is actually ahead with 27. Bernie is 25, and Klobuchar is right now hitting right at 15%. So that'll probably be a 3-3-2 split. 3 for Bernie, 3 for Buttigieg, and 2 for Klobuchar, giving Bernie 13 and 11 for 9 for Buttigieg, and 2 for Klobuchar.
There you have it, John from San Antonio's prediction. We'll have you call in tomorrow night, John. We're going to be doing coverage again, and we'll see if that stands. 13-9-2. That's what John from San Antonio says. Thanks for the call, bud.
Well, all right, thank you.
I think I'm going to have to reconnect on the phone here because I think we have a bad. I think that bad connection may be on our end. Let's go to some IMs. Brock.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Hold on one second. Here we go. We're going to get some IMs here. We have 54 people holding on the phone, folks. It's nuts. I don't know how we can, wait. Kyle is working on a members hotline, so we can actually have we'll have 2 phone lines. One will be members. It'll be like coast to coast, or like C-SPAN. Brock from Virginia. Corporate Democratic strategy is going to fail if Peter wins the primary. Just vaguely saying white men are toxic Bernie bros without nuance already alienates white voters. Then nominating a racist white mayor will alienate black voters and progressives. Who's left after that? White PMC Dems and old people seems super narrow. I just find it hard to believe that Buttigieg will win the primary, but call from Nebraska. I was supposed to be a precinct captain. Showed up and somebody was already there, but I was not trained on the app. I did put the calculations into a Google sheet on my phone though, then texted that to a field organizer. Done. Yeah, no kidding, right? Pickpocket trick. When will you be on a panel with Mr. Tingle? Who's Mr. Tingle? Jimmy Tingle? Who's Jay Tingle? I have no idea. I don't even know what that means. Rube David, did you notice Tom Perez saying something like 90% of the delegates will be selected before the convention during his speech before Friday's debate? What the F is that about? Shouldn't it be 100%? I don't know if he's talking about elected or if he's talking about superdelegates. Lying dog-faced pony soldier. I work for the U.S. Forest Service, and a coworker had to travel to India for dental care. Of course, nobody should have to go abroad for health care, but it's crazy that our own public servants have to. Pretty sure they are called the Butchisms. The Berlin Wall fell in 89. Right, it was the Berlin Wall in 89, and it was the fall of communism in 93. Sorry. Chris from Taiwan. Pete Buttigieg is a cyborg that was designed and programmed by the CIA. Albany Jeff. Cuomo is touting New York State as the progressive capital of the country while walking back cash bail reform and continuing to say fighting the Amazon deal was not progressive. I feel like he's gaslighting us. Well, that's his whole shtick. If anything, New York is the progressive capital only because we have constantly pushback against center-right Dems like Cuomo. Dr. from New Jersey, Dr. Eric from New Jersey. Hey, Sam, I wrote an essay called I'm a Physician, and I support Bernie Sanders because on healthcare, he is a moderate who can get things done. Title's obviously meant to be ironic and antagonistic towards the narrative his centrist opponents spin. Lays out the nightmare that will ensue if we go forward with building on Obamacare instead of single payer. I'm weighing where to submit it, but I am an avid MR viewer and would like to send it to you. Well, by all means, send it to majorityreporters@gmail.com. Not sure what we can do. Maybe we can post it on our blog, and so if people want to pass it around, we can do something like that. Calling from a 718 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hello?
Hello? 718. Where are you calling from?
Hello?
Hello?
Oh, is it 781?
Yeah. 781. Sorry.
My bad. Hey, how's it going, Sam?
Good. How you doing? What's on your mind? And tell us your name. Where are you calling from?
Patrick. I'm Patrick from Weymouth.
Patrick from Weymouth, Mass?
Yep, that's it.
All right.
Yeah, so I actually wanted to talk about a different primary, the Markey Kennedy one, and how I'm getting kind of nervous at this point about it.
Yeah.
You know? You've had this corporatist type center-left Democrat who's going to go after, I think, one of the strongest progressives we have in the Senate on, I'm not sure what his platform is at this point. I think he's just running out of a name.
I think you got it. I think he's a Kennedy. He saw his opportunity, and he raised, in my understanding, in the last quarter of last year, raised more money than Markey did. It is appalling in my mind. Look, I think it's good. I think primaries are good in general, and even against people that I, as a generic thing, even against good progressives. This one is one that I really have a problem with. One, Kennedy is getting support in a way that supposedly would get you blacklisted if you got that support. If you were if a progressive was running against a centrist. And I think it's problematic. I mean, I hope that there's some pushback, and it's going to be fascinating to see. But I don't blame you for being a little bit concerned.
It's strange because it seemed at first even the centrist side seemed to be critical of him for it. I remember Barney Frank said something about being shocked that he was going to do it, mostly because I think that, Markey, even though he's a progressive, has been in Congress for so long and has built up those relationships. Elizabeth Warren hasn't come out firmly for Markey, I don't think. People seem to be quieting down, and the last polls I've seen show him ahead, I think, based on name recognition, which is, very frustrating.
Yeah. I don't know what the answer is. I mean, I haven't been following it quite that closely, but, the Kennedys are there's a relationship between Massachusetts and the Kennedy name that I think is, runs very deep. And, I think, he's a problem. I think it's a shame, but we'll see. Appreciate the call.
Thank you. Bye.
Keep an eye on that one. I just want to touch on Romney again. I don't think we played his speech, did we? I don't think we did, but
No.
I don't know. Maybe we did on Thursday. So Mitt Romney was the lone dissenter in the Republican Party as to the Senate trial, and you still see huge dividends, right? Because on Friday, Donald Trump fired Colonel Vindman, who is the NSC advisor who testified against Trump, fired his twin brother, who was just related to Vindman. Right? Like, this is like, not only am I going to take you out, I'm going to take out your family. This is the Colonel Vindman was the guy who said to his father, who was essentially left the Soviet Union. He started off his testimony by saying, "Dad, don't worry. I know you're afraid of me doing this, but this is America. I'm not going to be punished for this." He was fired. They also fired Ambassador Sunderland. Now, I have less sympathy for this, but what is interesting is that the only person that had advocates in the Republican Senate to not fire was Sondland, Gordon Sondland, because he's a huge Republican donor. And they were afraid that he was going to shut off the valve of the money that he's given to these other Republican senators. They didn't care about Vindman. This is going to be a big problem for Susan Collins. This is going to be a big problem for Cory Gardner. And they know it. And Mitt Romney has helped that quite a bit. I certainly, when I was, advocating for impeachment and arguing that it was going to help unseat Republican senators, I didn't know that Mitt Romney would vote for impeachment, or should I just say conviction. I didn't know that Donald Trump would fire, a medal awarded NSC advisor and his brother. But these are all, when you put them on the defensive, this is what it is. Donald Trump cannot say this is a partisan witch hunt. They have to deal with Mitt Romney. And here is how they're dealing with Mitt Romney to their own sort of like voters. Never mind the non-Fox viewing voters. They are worried about the Fox viewing voters because of Mitt Romney. Because I will remind you, Mitt Romney was the presidential nominee for the Republican Party 8 years ago. So here's Jeanine Pirro. They're basically having to say, and even I noticed Dave Rubin got in on this, that Mitt Romney's a secret Democrat.
The most difficult decision you've ever made? Mitt, you're full of it. And since you're such a scholar, did you ever consider the president's constitutional rights that were stripped from him in the Star Chamber, where he was denied the presumption of innocence? The truth is, Mitt, you simply despise Donald Trump. Your jealousy of this man is a constant rage burning within you because you can never rise to the heights that he has. Because guys like you fold like wusses. And you don't have any selflessness or the ability to think about others as Donald Trump has thought about making America first. And by the way, you're an embarrassment. I should know. I said it 4 years ago.
There you go. Wow.
Powerful stuff.
Powerful stuff. But the fact that they need to do this on Fox News is quite helpful. That they're not talking about the clearly partisan witch hunt. That they're still having to make excuses as to why it wasn't partisan. It's because he's a wuss. I'm not sure what it is he's afraid of that makes him so wussified.
Yeah. When the vote first came out, I was kind of rolling my eyes at the sanctimony of Romney making the vote and all the Nicole Wallaces of the world being like this brave man. And it is a historic event. But the cover it gave to people like Doug Jones, Manchin, I guess,
and Sinema
is huge because we aren't talking about them at all. Nobody is. And I would imagine, I wonder if they knew. I don't know.
R comes after M anyways, and J. I don't know, because it's true. There is, and I don't know if Schumer was responsible for it, but I was surprised at that vote. Everybody was. And they're still, days later, still having to talk about that. Here is, and they've got to be scrambling now. I mean, Tom Tillis in North Carolina, they are pouring money into the Democratic primary, trying to elect the most left-wing primary opponent they can for Tom Tillis, because Tom Tillis in North Carolina is worried about losing his election. There's a decent number of military bases down there. Donald Trump not only is parading around someone that the Navy found to be basically a war criminal, but he's also now firing military personnel and their brothers for testifying. So Lindsey Graham needs to run to face the nation and also justify himself. And I guess presumably help cover with Susan Collins, but Lindsey Graham is no longer John McCain's what do you call it, haberdashery? What is that? Haberdasher? What do you call it? Like just like his valet. Mm. He's now on his own, and it's all
he's flying solo.
He's flying solo, and it's not going so well. Here he is on Face the Nation.
President, I'm going to get to the bottom of the FISA warrant process, because it was an abuse of power of the Department of Justice, the FBI, and we're going to make sure that Hunter Biden's conflict of interest is explored because it's legitimate. How could Joe Biden really fight corruption when his son's sitting on the Burisma board?
But can you clarify? You said you talked to Attorney General Barr
this morning.
Has the Department of Justice been ordered to investigate the Bidens?
No, the Department of Justice is receiving information coming out of the Ukraine from Rudy.
Already?
To see, he told me that they have created a process that Rudy could give information, and they would see if it's verified.
Pause it. Hold on for 1 second. There's a process now for the president's lawyer who's going around doing his own mod squad investigation, and there's an official process in which for him to give that, like, as opposed to.
And doesn't represent him as the president either.
I mean, this is just bizarre. The best thing about it is, like, you chose the wrong guy to investigate. Better crank up Pete Buttigieg's stuff in the Ukraine, or Sanders in the Ukraine. They're going to come up with something. They're going to have to mutate this. This is my prediction, what they're going to do with Ukraine. They're going to have to mutate this into something that's going to be relevant for 2020, which means that they're going to find through this investigation that there is actually like some type of server in Burisma that is in the Burisma basement or bathroom or wherever it is. And that server is connected to like the main voting server in the United States. And that's why the election is not valid unless the president wins. This is just stunning stuff.
That they have created a process that Rudy could give information, and they would see if it's verified. Rudy Giuliani is a well-known man. He's a crime fighter. He's loyal to the president. He's a good lawyer. But what I'm trying to say to the president and anybody else, that the Russians are still up to it. Deterrence is not working. So let's look at Hunter Biden's conflict. Let's look at Joe Biden. Vice President Biden, what did you do when they told you your son was on Burisma's board? It undercut your ability to fight corruption. Did you take it seriously? Obviously, he didn't. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to documents coming out of the Ukraine to Republicans and Democrats, be very cautious. Turn anything you got over the intel community.
Have you ever said to the president, when he repeats things like the idea that there's the DNC server hidden in Ukraine, that this is Russian propaganda that he is repeating and apparently believing? Have you ever said that directly to him?
Well, I don't have any information about the server being in the Ukraine.
But you just said things coming out of Ukraine should be looked at with high
Here's
scrutiny
my point.
because of Russian
My
interference.
point. It was the Russians who hacked into the DNC, not the Ukrainians.
Mm-hmm.
But there are people in the Ukraine that were pulling against Trump because they hated Manafort. To suggest there was no political interference coming out of the Ukraine directed toward the president, I think would not withstand scrutiny.
When you have a
Wow, this guy is all over the place. I wish we had one of those, like, we could put his transcript of what he's saying there and just sort of map this out.
Yeah, animate it.
It's unbelievable. But that is how muddled they are, and I think a lot of it is because of Mitt Romney, frankly.
Mm-hmm.
And also, now, like, it appears that Joe Biden, fine, why don't you go back and relitigate Benghazi, too, while you're at it?
Sure.
What was Joe Biden doing in Benghazi? We never hear about that. We never hear about Hunter Biden's involvement with Benghazi. Why can't we put that on again? I think they're sort of flailing around a little bit. And as the kids say, I am here for that.
If you're here for it, there's a bit more going into this back channel.
Let's hear it. Let's hear it. This is fascinating to me because they have like set the table. They've placed their bets, and now they're gonna have to come up with like another country, and they're gonna have to come up with another scandal.
role as chairman of Senate Judiciary to have oversight of Justice Department.
I'm not in charge of the whole government.
I understand that. However, when you're talking about being asked to do these things and a channel being opened between Rudy Giuliani and the Justice Department, this sounds a lot like this is, in some ways, a taxpayer-funded Oppo research operation against Joe Biden. Isn't this exactly what was at the heart of the impeachment probe to begin with?
No, not at all. There are plenty of people being contacted by folks from the Ukraine. Adam Schiff got contacted by somebody he thought to be a Russian, and he was willing to get on a plane, apparently, and go find the documents. Schumer believes that Parnas has got the goods. Parnas says, I'm in on it. I've never met Parnas. So Democrats are being played, and I'm not going to be played. So we're going to look at the Hunter Biden, Joe Biden connection to the Ukraine. We're going to ask the State Department, why didn't you do something about the conflict of interest? When the John Kerry's chief of staff was warned about Hunter Biden's conflict on Burisma, what did you do, if anything? That's all legitimate. Rudy says he's got the goods. All I can tell Rudy and anybody else, if you got some information connected to the Ukraine against anybody, go to the Intel Committee, not me.
Yep.
What?
Yeah.
I thought they were going to the DOJ.
So did I. A minute ago they were.
This guy's all over the place. Don't they work these talking points out beforehand, or did he just not expect to be asked any questions of it?
I don't know. I just think Rudy has put them in a position that they cannot logic
completely tenuous situation where they cannot work. They can't do anything. All right, we got time for one more caller, folks. I'm sorry. I know we got a ton of people on the line. I just, what can I do? Calling from a 619 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, this is Josh in San Francisco.
Josh from San Francisco. What's on your mind?
Just a couple of quick things. One, I don't know if you knew about this. I read a thing about Bernie Sanders, and I learned that he went to school with Walter Block.
Yeah, I think I did know that. They came from the same, was it in Brooklyn? I think that's where it was. Yeah.
Yes, this in Brooklyn.
I think Walter Block
anyway,
told
I
us
thought
that.
was interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe we can look forward to Block serving in a Sanders administration. But also, I just wanted to say a couple of things. One is I've been canvassing a lot for Bernie, and running some, having some canvassers go out, and it's kind of interesting. I think your theory about
where have you been doing it?
And this is in San Francisco.
Okay.
But I think your theory is somewhat right about people not really being that particular. I mean, a really popular sentiment we hear at doors is, I just want someone who's going to beat Trump. So,
and I think,
it's
the most rational response for a voter who feels that way to say, I'm not in a position to make this decision. Right? Like, I mean, I think there's a lot of people who are just like, I could tell you who I prefer, but I just want somebody who's going to beat Trump, and I don't know who that is. And I think that is going to dampen some turnout, I think, frankly.
Yeah, and you also see too, like the whole. You sometimes talk about people, voters being ideologically incoherent, and I've heard people say things like, "Well, I like either Harris or Warren," and it's like they're not alike. So how But I just want to add one other thing too, real quick, on the whole thing about shadow. A lot of former Clinton campaign people, I guess, are involved in that company, and I wanted to tell you, Mike from PA, remember when he called after 2016's loss and talked about what he experienced in Pennsylvania knocking on doors. I was here in the San Francisco office for the Clinton campaign, and we actually saw the same thing there. Lots of support for Trump during get out the vote calls. Probably about 20% of our calls were going to Trump people. Total catastrophe. But I wanted to say a really quick thing that I think you'll find interesting. When we first went to the Clinton office, we were coming as former volunteers, and we said, hey, give us the list of voters that you called.
Former who voter?
During
former.
During 2016, we were doing volunteering for Bernie.
Okay, so you were former Bernie volunteers. Yeah. Okay, and you asked for the phone calls.
After he lost. That's right. We said, hey, give us the list of the voters you ID'd as being Sanders, and let us reach out to them. And maybe because we were former Sanders people, we can help persuade them. And there was no interest.
Right.
Like they were like the guy running the office thought it was a good idea, but he said the campaign had no interest in it at all.
Right. They don't want to give Sanders people like an awareness of who their Sanders people are. Right.
That's right. And I just think that's sort of indicative of the kind of thing you're talking about. Like, I just, if you have people who are making a decision like that, that to me seems so foolish. Like, what kind of quality of decisions can we expect to come from them down the road?
Yep. And they're motivated by different things. I appreciate the call. That's a good call. And just to remind people that what we heard from Mike from PA, what we've learned from subsequent voting is that in lieu of a traditional field campaign, Hillary Clinton used modeling, demographic modeling for assuming where the votes were. And they were so off that I think Mike from PA told us on the day of the campaign or after the campaign that 25% of the doors they were knocking on were Trump voters. And on the day before the election, you can't do that for your get out the vote. You need to be doing like a 80%, 90% yield of your voters. Because otherwise, not only are you not reaching your voters, you're motivating the other side to go out and vote. It's nuts. All right, let's look at this. What? What's this? What's this one? Yeah. Let's. Should we save this for tomorrow? Let's say that tomorrow. Let's do this. Fox and Friends reacting. Everybody was very upset about the. My understanding is that what's his face? The Brad Pitt said that John Bolton did not speak, and people got very upset about how politicized that was. Here's Fox and Friends reacting to the idea that someone said "Workers of the World Unite."
Do you want the source of it as well? They don't play it at the Fox and Friends clip.
Well, no, but this is just the director of that movie Factory, right?
Yep, American Factory.
Yeah, this is a documentary, and they are really concerned about this. And again, this is a preview. They are so sensitive to this because they think Bernie Sanders could be the nominee. And they're basically starting to train their audience to be worried about communism. But they keep, they blew it because they're associating it with Barack Obama. And the point is that like everybody's sitting there going, we lived through one communist president, Barack Obama. So we know that it can't be that, that horrific. Good.
As you said in the intro, Workers of the World Unite is a line from the Communist Manifesto. And that quickly became a top trending topic on Twitter. I learned that yesterday through Twitter. I didn't know. Yeah. This Twitter user says, "Oh, good."
Does anybody else see the problem with this?
Ugh.
I mean, this is the problem they're going to have when they run against Sanders, is that even the Fox News host had no idea that these words came from communism and that communism is bad. And like, they're going to have to do this, throughout the entire campaign. It's going to be a rerun of like, you can't Barack Obama, it's Chicago politics.
Yeah, they're gonna have to bring out Chris Matthews' conservative friends to educate them.
But they're going to have to start this education process. Remember, they had 30 years to do this with Clinton, and it was easier too because everybody understands what murder is. All you have to say is that Hillary Clinton murdered people, and they're like, "Well, I know what a murder is. That's bad, right?" But we're going to have to take us through like we're workers of the world. If the workers of the world unite, I'm not sure I follow that. It's Chicago politics all over again. It's like, well, first of all, there was the Untouchables with Elliot Ness, and they were going after Al Capone. And because of all the mobs there were unions, and what they would do is they would mess with the ballot boxes. Now, none of you are young enough to know who JFK was in real life, but Joe Kennedy, his father, that's why Chicago politics never worked, because everybody's like, what?
Just call him a Muslim.
Everybody gets, yeah, exactly. Well, let's shift to the Muslim socialist. This is the problem they're going to have. Like, I didn't know, says the Fox and Friends host over the weekend. She's great. I hope they put her on more often. Who is that? Carly Schmickus?
Yeah, Carly Shimkus.
Shimkus? All right.
Communist manifesto. And that quickly became a top trending topic on Twitter. I learned that yesterday through Twitter. I didn't know. Yeah. This Twitter user says, "Oh, good, some communist manifesto thrown into the Oscars. If any of these people knew basic history, they might figure out just how many millions of innocent people have died as a result of the ideology based on this mantra." And then this quick tweet, "Amazing how they embrace socialism but thrive on capitalism." Maybe she didn't know it was part of the Communist Manifesto. I don't know what's going on in her mind. She does have cancer, and she's going through chemotherapy, so we have to wish her, of course, the best of luck and all the health in the world on that front.
Yeah, they don't. They're like, what? I mean, I don't know what to say. This is the problem they're going to have, is that it just doesn't resonate anymore. And the idea that this documentary is promoting the killing of millions of people, I just think it's not going to sell.
Yeah. I mean, also, they've had so much time to build this with Venezuela and, the sanctions we've put on them over the past 4+ years, however long. And that doesn't seem to have stuck either. Like,
of course not. Like, I mean, was there anybody watching the State of the Union? I mean, of course there were some, but there was anybody watching the State of the Union which is like, oh, God bless them for bringing Juan Guaido up here. I mean, this man, like, honestly, like even like a fraction of this audience even knows who Guaido is, right? And the idea that like there are people like, Trump supporters just like, God bless President Trump for having Juan Guaido here. And you know that Trump and they are thinking, if we bring Guaido here, we're going to finally be like crack open this conversation about Venezuela that we've been dying to have. Because Maduro, it's like, we're going to tie Bernie to Maduro.
Yeah, and meanwhile, Guaido messes that up even when he has an interview and they ask about AOC, and he's like, a socialist? AOC? She would be in the center in my country.
Yes, exactly. It's... By the end of this thing, Guaido could be going around just basically, doing interviews on behalf of the Sanders campaign. Like, socialist? Ha! This guy's a conservative in Venezuela. We should get that clip from AOC. Do we play that?
Which?
The one by Guaido.
Oh, I think it's just
Oh, we should get that. We should get that for tomorrow. All right, folks, I'm sorry. We can't take any more calls. I'm going to do a couple more IMs. Tomorrow, we're going to play some of this in this right-wing comedy show. And we'll also get to the update on Jordan Peterson. We'll do that tomorrow. I mean, look, I know that I have a couple of friends who have been through stuff with benzos. And it's a very tough situation to kick. But the story coming out of the National Post and Jordan Peterson, it's bizarre. I think I understand why Dave Rubin seems so adrift right now. He's lost his moral center. 5 more IMs and we're out of here. Caller from Galatia? I don't know. Hi, Sam. What did you think of Steyer on Friday's debate? Behind Sanders, I think Steyer did second best in the debate. It seems like he would go after the other candidates, which I really liked, but I can't help but feel like he's a wolf in sheep's clothing. Left is best. Tom Steyer is running for the Senate in California. I'm convinced what he's doing. And I'm also convinced that what he thinks he's going to be able to do is get Bernie Sanders, if not his endorsement, then he's playing to Sanders and to Warren's, I think, constituencies, because I think that's the lane he wants to run in California. That's what I think is going on there. I mean, do I think that he's sincere? I don't know. I think that there is to be spending the kind of money he's spending and not spending on re-enfranchising voters in Florida, paying for all those fines and whatnot, or pouring money into state races across the country, I think it's criminal is too strong of a word, but criminal.
He's not going to wait around for Feinstein, though. He would go after Harris next time, right?
Oh, I don't know about that. When is Feinstein's up? I guess
she just got reelected.
Oh, geez. What was that?
No idea.
Water boat from Kashmir. From Kashmiris, and I mean every Kashmiri I know it has spoken to, please get out and vote America and donate to Bernie. You cannot imagine the number of lives a mere statement from the President of the United States can save. And Bernie's very basic and standard but principled take on Kashmir had a huge ramifications during the crackdown, which continues. Please remember that foreign policy is critical to our global problems, but even if we can't think globally, just remember if you care about humanity or human rights, no other candidate makes the cut. Donald Trump's Jewish accountant. I like to listen to MR as a guilty pleasure whenever the boss isn't around, but I have to agree with David Feldman about Bernie's penchant for counting. As Mr. Trump always says, the only kind of people I want counting my money are short guys wearing yarmulkes. Those are the only kind of people I want counting my money, nobody else. The Chris Lapaco. I'd want to check with John from San Antonio this, but I'm pretty sure Bernie's plan for public execution polls well in swing states. It's all paid for by a modest tax on billionaires. Speaking of which, when are the people going to go after Bloomberg for his tax returns? I see nothing on the internet about how much he's paid in federal income tax, but I do see that he tried to hide as much as possible about his taxes when he was mayor of NYC. I don't know if that would matter in the general election, but I think it would matter in the primary. Indeed. Pajama Boy. Hey, Sam, I think you're overlooking Biden's potential three-peat, and it really shows in your bias. My man is about to lose a presidential primary for the third time. Great accomplishment. 2 more. Joey BFE. On Bill Maher, Bill and Fareed lamented Bernie's chances. Their attacks on Bernie were based on positions like open borders that Bernie has never taken. They held up Corbyn Johnson election as proof that a leftist can't beat a Trump type. To me, the lesson is different. How establishment will use lies and strawmen to make it nearly impossible to get their message through to voters. When you can't even get a fair shake on liberal media, what do we have? Well, look, this is par for the course with Bill Maher. A Square. Wow, Sam, I felt like saying thanks, Obama, every day last week with the self-inflicted mess in Iowa, the SCOTUS decisions, and the rest of the mess. Every week we say the Mad King is nuts, and then he tops himself ranting for an hour in the Mad Court, nodding, clapping, making obsequious comments. It's like a banana republic autocracies were sowed across the world for over a century. Thanks for mixing up the reportage so we also don't lose our minds. And the final, I am of the day, it is Eichem Quickie. Ich am Quickie. Oh, I'm quickie. I don't know. Chris Matthews' arguments about Bernie might really have some traction, especially the one about getting hit by a car. If it was used a little more practically, it could be even worse. Imagine you're in a stall in a woman's bathroom and you realize you need a feminine hygiene product. You'll have to ask somebody nearby to help. Which of the candidates do you think will help you? Bernie? I don't think so. Sorry, Warren. Mayor Pete? Probably. Klobuchar? Maybe. Biden's probably already packing, but this doesn't help Bernie. Sorry. I don't get it, but see you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the lie bar, but finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I guess somewhere the choice was made for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive